We want to take you live now to the ANC's elective conference in the Northwest Province, and we understand that NEC member Nomvula Mokonyane is shortly going to address the gathering there.
August, because the NEC in July took a decision that the Northwest, Free State and Western Cape, otherwise the NEC will then review progress, must be concluded by the end of August. And the Northwest has started, and it has to conclude by the end of August in fulfillment of that decision of the National Executive Committee. So definitely we have to find space before the end of August to do so. And then once then the plenary has concluded, you'll then be seeing the delegates file into the voting station to go and cast their votes. Those who want to wait for the results, then they will wait, and those who do not, and then will be at liberty to go home, because quite a number are working people that will want to go to work tomorrow. We have since advised the president, because the conference has not concluded its business, because the president closes when everything else has happened, and therefore that he should no longer proceed to come, so that we are negotiating whether that date, because he wanted to really address the Northwest Conference, will then negotiate whether he's available or not available, or any of the officials to come and close the conference when it has concluded its business. And therefore the president will no longer be coming to close, because the conference is adjourned, so it means it has not concluded its business. I think that's the message.
Okay. Good afternoon and blessed Sunday to all Christians. Yes, the conference proceedings are underway. The team that has been dealing with registration and compilation of the accreditation reports have now generated a credentials report, which was presented last night. And in the deliberations last night, amongst other things that was raised was that we have branches who, in line with the new guidelines of the ANC, had nominated their delegates and have put their nomination forms in the packages of the nomination of candidates, submitted them to the Electoral Committee in line with the guidelines, and with some of those packages that the Electoral Committee had, we had a few challenges, such as the content in the package was not the same as the names of those who were presenting themselves at the registration center. So then you then have to go back, call the branch, especially the branch chair and the branch secretary, or any other leader of the branch, to get confirmation, including consulting with a deployee who was sent to that meeting to be an observer. That is one. The other issue was that there were some of the packages that did not have the allocated delegates being constituted in line with the ANC policy, that where you have two delegates, one must be female and the other must be male. Because that is a policy of the African National Congress, and where you have three, at least one must be female. But if it is three females, you don't have to change that. So those were the issues that we had to deal with, because these are issues that are managed totally separate from the work of the IPC and the steering committee of conference, or by the registration or credentials committee, but it is a responsibility of the electoral committee. At national level, you know, the Kgalema Motante committee. So the ANC in its endeavor of renewal and self-correction has put these systems in place. And only after the Electoral Committee has opened the packages, then the organizational processes have got access to that information. And where there is a query on it, you have to revert back to the Electoral Committee. The other issue was around the appeals that had gone to the National Dispute Resolutions Committee. The Northwest had 54 appeals that were with the National Dispute Resolutions Committee. All those disputes were attended to, and some of those disputes verdicts called for a rerun. And calling for a rerun, it means you cannot then conclude your credentials report until the branch has exercised what the NDRC has instructed the branch to do. So this is what we were dealing with from last night after the presentation of the credentials, including ensuring that we then comply with the court ruling of taking out the IPC that was part of the credentials as the voting delegates, but because now there was a court ruling, you had to take them out. And pursuant to the discussions, then there was a resolution also that says, also we need to exclude the regional
IRCs.
Yes, the IRCs. We must exclude the IRCs. That's also what had to happen. Because for a conference, 90%, not less than 90% of the voting delegates have to be branch delegates, and then 10% is a 10% that is allocated to the PEC, here the IPC, the leagues, and then the regions. So conference, because of the 10% allocation that has been affected by the court ruling, then agreed that we will forfeit the 32 that was going to go for the IPC and the IRCs. So all those things had to be sorted out so that then you have a register and credentials that may not be a subject of any court challenge, that you still have these participants that the court said they must not participate in voting. So we had to then move them as voting delegates to non-voting delegates. This morning we went in, we worked, and the team is working with the IEC, with the election and the Electoral Committee. The voters' roll is being reconciled by the Electoral Committee and the election. In the course of the work, as we were at the Registration and Accreditation Center, there was this issue about tags. In fact, there are two instances that have happened. One is that there were individuals who invaded the registration center and grabbed our administrators, took away the tags and fled with the tags. We know those tags. We know those tags because those were the tags that were supposed to be distributed now that there's been a readjustment of the delegates, as I've earlier said. A criminal case has been opened against those individuals. Fortunately, there's also footage, and we hope that as the organization we will be able to exercise discipline over and above laying criminal charges against those individuals. Later, there were also issues raised about tags that, a bunch of tags, and when the report was sent to us, we all got worried. But precisely because the ANC is also self-correcting, and its system is becoming much, much more tighter in terms of security and all other security features. Over and above the ones that were seen and were circulated, some of them held by the Youth League members, we can confirm that these ones are not our tags. They are not our tags because they do not have the features. We've got a three-way verification of a tag of this conference. So people might have thought they can go and clone our cards, our tags, but this tag and this tag are not the same. So even with the ones that have been circulated of one individual with more than 15 tags, one reality is that even when you go and vote, you can't come back because the system itself clocks you once. When Kenny Murolong goes in, you can't come in 15 times. The system just locks you out. Because besides the three-way security protection, you also have your ID that is on the voter's roll. Because of our new membership system and because of our own renewal, so it is no longer an issue of just presenting a card. It is about the security, it is about you presenting yourself, and then it is about your identity card. So that's what has happened, and we are quite disturbed and we want to condemn this because it seeks to undermine a process that the ANC has invested a lot of time on, and a product that seeks to ensure that there is transparency, and most importantly, we accommodate everybody to have a uniform and a standardized manner of accreditation that is tight in terms of security. So ourselves and through the convener of the NEC deployees in the Northwest have also briefed the South African Police Services, and our own internal security has actually confirmed these ones that Comrade Obed is having, including the ones that we're talking about. So there are people who do not wish to see systems of the ANC running in a very smooth way, but I think the ANC has actually been 3-4 steps ahead of them. And that is something that we also appreciate, that we have a system that is watertight. Once you try and do something, unless you use the very system we have, you can go and print such a tag, but it may not be the same as this tag. Thanks, Comrade Kenny.
Thanks, Sis Nomvula and Comrade Obi. I'm going to allow for 2 rounds of questions, colleagues, following which we'll have to return to conference to conclude the work of conference. Can I invite questions? Jones? Who else? Serve. 3, 4, in that order.
The first question, is it safe to say that the security measures were breached after the allegations of accreditation tags being temporary? And secondly, just want to be curious as to why were registrations continuing up to the date? Is that not a bit of rigging as well? Because we heard allegations on the ground of that being rigged from one of the branch members. And maybe just lastly, why were credentials not seconded? Is it true that the ANC NEC imposed the adoption of credentials on delegates? Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Mohan from Sunday Times. First, I like detail. Mokize is talking about a bunch of the tags that were replicants. What is the actual number of those tags that were identified? And then secondly, isn't the ANC worried because what she just explained is pure criminal conduct in the ANC conference, probably by ANC members, because I assume everyone who's maybe to the side of the barbed wire fence is an ANC member. Isn't the ANC worried that it is now really degenerating into a criminal organization?
Thank you, Hawala Mahola, with you. Just following up on John's question about credentials being adopted while registration is still proceeding. What does your own rules say, the Constitution, about credentials being adopted? Because I went there in the afternoon with the call, Mr. Mororo. The number there was quite large, just based on observation. And then secondly, the question of cost. For an organization that is crying poverty, I think this has been a bit wasteful in that people today have been loitering a large part of Saturday and Friday as well, waiting for this and that. So if you've incurred cost for waiting, do you have an idea of how much cost you've been incurred, you've been paid for, or and finally, this process of phoning branches to correct discrepancies between individuals presenting themselves, you referred to it even on Friday when you were talking about the gender parity. Is it not by on its own a violation of your own rules in that you are correcting what is seen as a mishap of a BGM by phoning an individual, a chairperson, a secretary, who in other circumstances you may find that the outcome did not favor them. Now you are phoning this person to give you a name of an alternative candidate. Is that not undemocratic on its own?
Last question. Sure.
From if you're continuing with voting, I assume that credentials have been adopted despite the discrepancies. Then why have you not gone into commissions while you were dealing with some of your issues? You had been on numerous occasions saying that the ANC's conferences are not conferences of just electing leadership. You talk about policy. But if then you are eligible to continue to vote, then why did you not continue to break into your commissions?
Can we take the final question this side?
From Daily Maverick. You say a criminal case has been opened against a bunch of individuals behind the tags that were stolen. Are you able to sort of give an indication of how many exactly? Thank you.
Okay. Comrade Obi?
Yeah, let me start and then Comrade Nombulam Gonyane will add. Let me start with the issue of the commissions. The conference ran from yesterday into the night until 6 o'clock in the morning, when at 6:30 we concluded business of whatever the plenary was doing, to allow delegates to go back to their hotels, take a 1-hour nap, wash, eat breakfast, and come back. Naturally, obviously, that process is tedious. People are staying in different hotels. Others take a nap and they oversleep because the body is no longer functional. We had said 9 o'clock we are starting, knowing we are aiming at 10 o'clock. And then unfortunately between 9 and 10, the delegates were tripling in those who were able to wake up. It was only after 11 towards 12 when the delegation was able to be a sizable, and almost half a day is gone. And we needed also, even if they were in commission, they were going to go into plenary to now begin to get the processes of voting, and then so that voting can happen in commissions and then them coming in. So therefore that had a bit of delay. in terms of the commission. Therefore, I think much time obviously went into that, but the productive body almost worked for 24 hours. We had over-punished that particular body, and I think it is understandable under circumstances that we find ourselves in. I wish we could have ended around 11, and then we were there 9 o'clock, and definitely commissions would have started, as was the plan. And then 2 issues before Comrade Nomvula comes is the issue of the people who came to the accreditation center. It was a combination of genuine cases that we had to deal with. However, there were those who were sent in just to come and disrupt. Some were drunk, very ill-disciplined, rowdy. And at that time when we started saying we are separating the issues, those who are here for accreditation collection stand on this side, we counted them, and then those who were said, I was in the funeral or whatever that made them to delay and so forth, we put, and with them, we started seeing people disappearing and then leaving the yard, and then the genuine cases remaining. That's why we're able to have then smooth and re-establish the disruption that had occurred, unfortunately, put back the machines and so on. And it's a tedious process itself. But there were those intentions of coming to disrupt and collapse the administration. So that's why they even overpowered the security. So as we said, you went there, indeed, you saw what you saw, because at the time, it was a mixture of both. I wish you could have came after 1 o'clock to see the cleanliness and the smoothness. After those, when we say what for, they ran away. For example, there was a delegation that came. They were told to rerun. The branch did not rerun. And then they come and say, we are here because we didn't run, but we want to rely on the original before the appeal. And we said, but we didn't rerun. And I thought there were delegates in the conference, and I got worried that then if they are here, it means there are wrong delegates there. I asked them, are the other delegates that are there? He says, no, there's no delegate there. And then I had to phone the head of the NDRC, Comrade Mduma Nana. He says, no, this is how we concluded. And I spoke to them. Your matter was concluded. He said, no, thank you, comrade. We are leaving now. We're going home. So they overburdened the administrators. They overburdened because they were taking chances of something that they didn't do. And they thought this process was a way of going into the conference. And it then bothers on the issue of criminality, that indeed this ill-discipline is now venturing into criminality. And as Comrade Nomvula said, we need to be proactive. Where if people are identified, we open charges. And we'll even trace where these things were printed. So that we could then begin to say, where is the source in the Northwest? Each time there are conferences, there will be cloning of the cards, because it seems like it's an old trend that resurfaces from time to time, and therefore we then have to deal with it. And therefore, I think the ANC must now be alive, and we have briefed the National Treasurer as Acting Secretary that this is a matter that needs to be looked at, and they've agreed that the opening of the case is correct, but it's a first step of the many things that we'll then have to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Brawi. Mrs. Nomvula.
Thanks, Kenny. The breach of security, in fact, it is our own security that picked this up. So they couldn't even have access. These guys, I'm saying guys anyway, yeah. It's guy and girl. Okay. They couldn't even enter precisely because the system was able to pick them up.
Because we are checking at the entrance.
So the system picked them up. So the thing that we are raising is that the ANC is becoming much more organized. The ANC is becoming much more systematic in dealing with its own issues, and our own systems are able to protect the integrity of the work that we are doing. When you present credentials in a conference, you present credentials, and as you present credentials, you also are afforded to have a discrepancy of about 10%,
an error of margin.
an error of margin, which helps you to then go out and clear other outstanding matters. So these branches do not even constitute 10%, which is quite good for a conference of this nature, which, by the way, the delegates who are participating from branches constitute almost 97%. Not 90, 97%. So, when you reconcile and generate a voter's roll that you then use for voting, you bring all these others that were outstanding and those that were consolidated after the presentation at conference. By the way, when you present at conference, you present to say, yes, this conference is constituted in line with the constitution of the ANC by not less than 70% of ANC branches. So the province has met a threshold. Secondly, you then say, this conference does correct. That's the purpose. This conference does correct, and it can start with the business. Then when you come in to come and vote, then the electoral committee of the ANC that works with the election or any election agency will then come in and say, having looked at the credentials and the consolidated register of everybody who is here in conference, this is the total number of voting delegates. That's what happens in conference. And that on its own, what it does, it then gives the conference participants, especially the voting delegates, all of them, an opportunity to participate in voting. But also, remember now the conference has corrected with 70% threshold. You have the 90%, and in this instance, it's 97% of branch delegates in the conference. So you can then proceed with the work of the conference. So it is that has to be understood, that there is nothing untowards. There is actually nothing untowards, because even when credentials are discussed, there are things that you go and correct. Like last night, there were issues that came from plenary that we went and corrected. You see, for an organization like the ANC, there will not be any other way of verification. Remember, you have replacements of people who are off sick or people who are unable to attend,
Those who died,
those who have passed on, funerals, and those that you have to confirm the delegation, say there is no form and so forth. You call those that are not at conference, because, again, remember, as part of organizational renewal and improving the systems in the ANC, in the package that is with the electoral committee, you have the name of the chairperson, you have the name of the secretary, and it is not myself, Obet and Kenny, who fill in this form. It is the leadership of the branch that delegates me to come to conference. You contact those people who have delegated us to say, you have Nomvula, you have Obet, you have Kedi. Are they the delegates? Because there is also Smangmang and Smangmang and Smangmang who also purport to be members, to be delegates. So you deal with it that way. Precisely because it is in the guidelines. Something that we used to lose court cases because we never had that means of verification. And that's why we now are even winning these kind of cases that challenge the right of a member that challenge whether a member has been listened to, where we used to have challenges about whether we have the right delegates in conference. As I've said, the management of delegates to conference, it's not handled by the political leadership that has got interest. It's managed by the Electoral Committee, appointed to run the BGMs that nominate delegates. So that is how tedious is this process that ends up with a credentials report for the African National Congress. When you have to also deal with the issues of gender parity, one of the things that is a requirement is that if you have 2 delegates, you must then also have another delegate who is your potential substitute in the case that Kenny or Obed are not going to be able to attend. There must be somebody who's an alternate. So it is a decision of a branch. When the branch has got 2 delegates, it must appoint an alternate. Where the branch has not appointed an alternate, you must check also whether it is true that that branch didn't exercise that. So the issue of gender parity is a non-negotiable, so it has to be dealt with. So I think it is the correct thing, it is the only means of verifying, because you can't then call a branch general meeting. The beauty is that the form that has got our names as delegates is filled by the leadership of the branch. The issues around the charges, when you go and open a case, you go and open a case and you say, they came in, they took our assets, they actually manhandled us in an unbecoming way. This is the information, and let the police deal with it. That's what we have done. Lastly, what you don't do is to continue with registration. There are no new delegates that are registered. It's the issuing of tax, it's the corrections that are within what has been presented already at plenary of these branches that we knew that they were awaiting A, B, C, and D. So we know, hence the ones that were coming in, thinking that they can now come and start a dispute resolution process at the registration point, were explained to, and they will understand that, remember, this is not a PDRC. Remember, this is not an appeals body. And then they leave. But then there were those who were told, you must go and disrupt. You must go and do something wrong. So we had to also deal with those issues. It is an unfortunate thing that we have to be very tight on issues of security, but it continues to be something that we work hard on. We have seen a chairperson of a branch who came to me and Comrade Gwen with his delegation, and he said, you know what, in our branch we had chosen that me and Sipo are delegates to the provincial conference, and then Dikeledi and Matsepo are going to be delegates to the regional conference. But we have now called a meeting, and he showed us in their WhatsApp group of the branch that they've now since resolved that he's going to pull out as the chair and rather have one of the comrades who was going to be a delegate, a female delegate to the regional conference, to be part of this. It also shows maturity of members of the ANC, understanding and wanting to comply. We've had a blind chairperson of a branch who came to the accreditation. Upon his arrival, there was a deputy secretary of the branch together with another female comrade who is a delegate. And one of the things that they raised, the deputy chair actually said, we thought I would rather have a delegate who is a male because my branch wanted me as a blind person to be a delegate, and therefore because I'm male, I'll rather go no cane. But But because I'm told that there will be support here, and we believe in ensuring that it must be female and male, we are bringing our deputy secretary. So, who is female? So it is those kind of things that also shows that once there are challenges, there are also comrades who are maturing, who understand, and who are complying with the policies of the African National Congress. Thanks, Comrade Kenny.
Thank you very much, leadership. Guys, we do not have much time. I'm going to take the final round of questions because we need to return to conference. And possible follow-ups if there are any. Jones, Kaugelo, who else? 3. Are these all questions? Are these all hands? Okay. Can we start, Jones?
Just again on the issue of the gender parity substitution. Just a bit confused. I just want clarity around that whole matter. So did the substitution of legitimate delegates elected in BGMs not affect the threshold and legitimacy of this Congress? That's the first question. And secondly, on the basis of technicality, just if you can provide clarity on this, which clause was invoked to use the NEC to run as a constitution? Because my understanding is that an interim team was supposed to be appointed according to your constitution to oversee that conference as well.
Next. Sure.
I asked the question of the cost of this event, which you've already stated that you will have a second leg since you can't conclude.
Okay.
And how is it being paid?
Okay.
The proposition of the postponement of the conference has been tabled to the delegates as a proposition, and we somehow found ourselves in a closed session, which was probably our mistake, but we were not told. So we heard things.
You're always inside.
But it also seemed like there was some kind of resistance to adopt the proposition. I don't know what's happening now because it's a closed session and we're here, but if your proposal is not adopted, will this conference go on? Because the way you guys have put it out here, it almost looks cemented and certain that it will take place on the 25th to the 27th of August.
Braubi?
Yeah, we also don't know what is happening because people I've been trying to update and sending WhatsApps. I'm not succeeding because probably they're still busy with the question on the floor. So, and obviously if at one point then there must be a decision taken and then the conference must be divided so that the vote takes place and whatever majority view says, we go with that one. And we're hoping that a portion of the agenda which is adopted now and conference rules also have been adopted, then we'll continue with the conference, whatever date agreed, but because we've got a limit that it must happen in August, we then have to find that date. And that's why the 25th is the last weekend of August, so that we could then push it, but we are still going to be engaging. The business of whatever is remaining will then take place during that particular period. If it includes the top 5, if they don't agree to, it will start with the top 5. But nominations are done. We're not going to open nominations. They are done, sealed, and concluded as business of the conference. We'll then just voting, and thereafter wait for the results whilst people are in commissions, which has not resumed. And then from there also then have nomination session, which takes 3 hours to, by the way, for the additional 30, because people bring all names up to 70, up to 50, depending. We need to give space because ANC is a democratic organization, and then thereafter then have a conference declaration and adoption of the commission report. Then that concludes the business the following day and the closing of the conference. So there's a lot of business outstanding. Definitely it has to take, and it must be concluded. And that answers that question as to Are you just having conference for elections? No. That's why we'll want to have space to make sure, therefore, that the conference concludes. And then, so unfortunately, it's a norm that we find ourselves in because certain challenges arose. We could not ignore them. We attended to them, and that is why we are here. On the question of money, yes, it's costly to run ANC conferences, and we'll then have to look for resources to add, unfortunately, to the already costly exercise. And unfortunately, I can't give out how much was it. It's an organizational matter that is internal, and definitely there will be additional costs for the 2 days that are going to be chosen to then conclude the business. Running organization is a very expensive exercise, and the ANC, as you know, it has its own challenges of finances, but we'll try and source with those.
Obed Bapela there, just sharing the very latest on the reasoning behind the adjournment of the ANC Northwest Provincial Elective Conference.